Marcus Ely here for Status Coup at the Amy rally, Amy Klobuchar. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you out to see Amy Klobuchar today?
So I was originally text messaged by one of her team members. I've listened to some of the Democratic debates recently, and I find that she's one of the only more balanced candidates, a little more moderate, not quite so wild in her policies, and so I'm drawn to that.
And what about the wild policies kind of turns you off in specific?
I just think it's a little bit too far. I think a more moderate candidate reaches the larger demographic of the country, and that would just be better for us to move in that way instead of being so polarized.
So, but like policy wise, specific, like what policies are we talking about?
Um, I'm not a huge fan of only socialized healthcare. Being a healthcare professional, I think having choices is important, and I don't want to be forced off of my insurance and being on a only government option.
Okay, I'm gonna have to push a little bit back on you on this. Um, so do you actually care about your health care provider, or do you care, like, specifically the insurance as a whole, or do you care that the health care gets provided, period? It's just like, oh great, I got this paid for. Or is it specifically the insurance company, they're so important to me?
It's not necessarily the insurance company per se, but for my knowledge of what drives costs when you have competition, that's a good thing. And so I think having more than one option is important to keep things fair and balanced.
Okay, well, do you think it's fair that we pay twice as much as the countries that have socialized health care?
I think fair, looking at the different healthcare between the countries, there are some countries that have better outcomes and they are socialized countries, but they're not solely socialized either, and that's a it's a misconception. And so I think there's definitely room for improvement, um, but completely turning the system upside down, I don't agree with.
Then what about the idea of these companies making profit off of people dying? We have 30,000 a year, 30,000 people a year dying from preventable causes. And we've just decided, no, but profits are okay. Let's continue to make your profits. And that's just accepted as an okay thing.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that conversation with insurance companies. From hospitals only being reimbursed about 30%, I think that's crap. I don't think that's appropriate because we have a lot of costs that aren't necessarily reimbursed by insurance companies, and I don't agree with that. But I also haven't done all the research to know where all of the additional costs on the insurance side are coming from, so I can't specifically speak to that.
I can tell you where a large chunk of the costs are coming from, and it's profits. You know what I mean? Like, you're pulling money out of the system. If they didn't have to exist for profit, then that gets rid of a large chunk of the costs in that shareholders. I mean, the insurance industry alone. I could be wrong on this number, but I want to say it's $62 billion they made last year. That's $62 billion that could be going to helping people instead of going to profits. Is that, like, is that even a morally okay thing to you?
I guess it's not something I've specifically looked at or had conversations about. I also think we could do a better job of having preventable diseases. You look at the general health of America, and it's pretty poor, and some of that is self inflicted. So, where is it that we need to improve so that people can make better decisions so they don't end up with heart disease and they don't end up with having coronary artery disease that leads to other debilitating things that are driving costs up because they're really expensive diseases to manage. So there's a lot of aspects to this, and I think that sometimes we get caught in a couple poles of it without looking at the larger picture.
Definitely, it's really, like, you're right. Preventable things like could definitely happen if people ate better. They would definitely wouldn't have heart disease and all these other things. But it costs a lot of money to eat better, and people ain't got money in a lot of cases.
Right, but we're not having conversations about um, the areas that don't have access to fresh produce. That conversation isn't happening. They're focusing on the healthcare itself. So I think there are other conversations that need to happen with resources that could be allocated and problems that could be fixed, but it's not the popular thing to talk about, and so therefore it isn't. So you know, it's sexier to talk about something that can be debated, such as you know the general healthcare versus looking at the specifics of what can actually be done.
So, well, it can be done. We can just decide. It's just a decision. It's a matter of making a law because one day marijuana was illegal. The next day they wrote a law.
Right.
It's legal in a bunch of states now. You know what I mean? So one day making profits off of people dying is legal. Write a law. Next day it's not legal anymore. So it's not that it's not an argument of doable or not doable. And I think that a lot of times, and I'm not coming at you specifically. I think that a lot of you literally are on the front lines trying to deal with this stuff, right? So it's just we our media horribly misinforms people, and I hate to say that, but it is what it is. It horribly misinforms people because in a lot of cases we look at the commercials. What are they? Pharmaceutical commercials, insurance company commercials.